Good morning, sir. Good morning, Sir Major. Good morning, Old Hickory. Cliff Brack, and I'm the 150th Cav Squadron Commander. We're going to be doing a OPD this morning on the 2003 battle at Anna. And we're going to focus specifically on the 3-7 Cavs fight. They were part of the 3rd Infantry Division on their march into Iraq. Next slide, please. Just our quick agenda next. And I will start it off by setting up the scene. This will be about a 10-year timeline that leads to the second invasion of Iraq and ultimately gets us to An-Najaf. And we'll hit some of the key points that happened over the 10 years. Next slide, please. 1990, Saddam Hussein gathers his forces on the Kuwaiti border, nearly 100,000 of them, and he decides to attack Kuwait late summer of 1990 with about 100,000 troops. It takes him 3 hours to get from the border to the middle of Kuwait City. So he encountered very little resistance. In comparison, it takes me about 2 hours to drive in my Pajero to Kuwait City. Within a day and a half, Saddam's forces were on the Saudi Arabian border. Next slide, please. George H.W. Bush, Bush 1, was the President of the United States at the time. And he decided that this could not stand. That put Saddam Hussein in control of 40% of the world's oil reserves. So he launches Operation Desert Storm, winter of 1991, February of 1991. And we decimate the world's 5th largest army in about 100 hours. We achieved all of our objectives, which were to expel Iraq from Kuwait, return control of the oil fields to Kuwait, and restore the Kuwaiti international border. We accomplished that in 100 hours. Next slide. This is a picture of Highway 80, which runs between Kuwait City and An-Najaf, right through the middle of Iraq. It later became known as the Highway of Death because of the death and destruction that we inflicted on Iraqi forces as they were retreating, trying to get back to Baghdad. These pictures became public. CNN and all the news agencies aired them, and within 24 hours, major ground combat operations ceased. So this had a dramatic effect on the operation plan. And this spared Saddam Hussein. He survived to fight another day. Next slide. So throughout the mid and late 1990s, Iraq and Saddam Hussein continued to be bad actors in the Middle East. They demonstrated their ability and desire to use their weapons of mass destruction, chemical and biological, on their own people, the Kurds and the Shias. Next slide. To the point that in 1998, President Bill Clinton became so concerned about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction program that he launched Operation Desert Fox. You can see that's a Tomahawk cruise missile being launched from a ship in the Persian Gulf. Operation Desert Fox was a 4-day operation where we targeted over 100 military and Ba'athist Party locations. We fired 250 Tomahawk cruise missiles and dropped over 600 munitions over that 4 days. That 4-day operation set back Iraqi's WMD program about 2 to 3 years. Next slide. Fast forward to September 11, 2001, when our World Trade Centers were attacked and the Pentagon were attacked. Just within hours, we knew that Al-Qaeda was behind it, Osama bin Laden was behind it. And next slide, please. Within about 15 days, we launched U.S. operations into Afghanistan. Originally targeting the Taliban. The Taliban fell within about 60 days. With the fall of Kabul, the Taliban evacuated, abandoned the Afghanistan capital. Along with the Al-Qaeda, who was using Afghanistan as a safe haven, they retreated to the Tor-Bor Mountains. Next slide. Where we chased them, primarily with special forces, and then we used air power to bomb them over about a 4-day, the Battle of Tor-Bor, where we killed about 200 Al-Qaeda fighters and some of their key leadership. However, Osama bin Laden slipped away from us. Next slide. By late 2001, Al-Qaeda was on the run, the Taliban was on the run, and George W. Bush was now looking to expand the global war on terror. He wanted to target outside of Afghanistan. And this is when he pivots and when the administration pivots to Iraq. Keep in mind, Saddam Hussein tried to kill his dad, tried to assassinate his dad after the 1990 Persian Gulf War. So as he pivots to Iraq, he begins to make the argument that Iraq should be the next target. He includes Iraq in the axis of evil speech along with Iran and North Korea. He also announces the United States preemption doctrine that says we are not going to sit back and wait for terrorists to attack us anymore. If you're a terrorist, you harbor terrorists, or you're a state sponsor of terrorists, we will find you and kill you. And he also, in his axis of evil speech, says you are either with us or against us, clearly putting Saddam Hussein in his target, in his sights. Next slide. So President Bush and the administration spends about the next 18 months building a case against Iraq. Their destabilizing efforts in the Middle East, their building of their WMD program, and their continuous violations of UN security sanctions. He uses all of that to build a case for going to a war with Iraq for a second time. He makes the decision to do that, and he puts General Tommy Franks in charge. He is the CENTCOM commander who is in charge of making the plan and executing the plan for Operation Iraqi Freedom. Next slide. That brings us up to the Battle of Najaf, which takes place 24 March of 2003. And once we start our Operation Iraqi Freedom, we reach Najaf in 4 days. So at its high point, and Najaf turns into a knife fight. Thank you, sir. Sir Garrick, our prop for the day. All right, next. So as we go through the presentation, a few high points for you guys to think about as we get to the comments at the end. These are the 8 fundamentals of reconnaissance. And we're really going to focus on the ones that you see in bold there. So ensure continuous reconnaissance. Was the 3-7 able to do that? Or did they get tasked with other missions that prevented them from being able to do continuous reconnaissance? Gain and maintain enemy contact. That's critical for reconnaissance missions. Once we find that tag, we got to grab them by the tail and hang on to them. And did the 3-7 cap do that? Were they able to report all their information rapidly and accurately? And were they able to retain freedom of maneuver, or did they become decisively engaged and give up that freedom of maneuver? Next slide. All right, I'll be followed by the XO.
Hey, good morning, sir. Command Sergeant Major Old Hickory, Major McLaughlin, Castwater XO. So this presentation is going to focus on 3-7's CAV, seizure, and objective Floyd. Next slide, please. And that is actually up here in the town of Najaf on the southeast side, crossing the Euphrates River. but this didn't occur until 24 March of 2003. So it kind of got to paint the backstory picture of how we get from the LD international border up to Najaf with the 3-7. So as previously stated, on 19 March 2003 is when the invasion of Iraq actually occurred, and the first 2 days were all air campaign. So coalition ground forces stationed in Kuwait did not cross the international border until 21 March 2003. So just to box you in up here, you've got Baghdad to the north, south, here Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan to the west, and to the east, of course, Iran. This major boundary you have right here, core level boundary, separates the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, their area of responsibilities to the east, and that consisted of the 1st Marine Division and also an armored division from the United Kingdom. To the west of that boundary was 5th Corps' area of responsibility. 5th Corps consisted of the entire 3rd Infantry Division, all 3 brigades. You had the entire 101st Airborne Division. You had 2nd Brigade from the 82nd, and you also had a brigade task force Tarwa, consisting of the United States Marine Corps personnel. So on 21 March 2003 at 0300 hours, 1st MEF crossed the international border, breached the Burnham, and moved north to secure the southern oil fields. And in doing so, they came in contact with the Iraqi 51st Armored Division and destroyed that division. They subsequently isolated Al-Basra, and then they focused their attention moving up towards Al-Naziriyah to Highway 1. Simultaneously, 5th Corps, spearheaded by 3rd ID, 3-7 Cav in the lead, moved along this axis of advance, and their first objective was to move to Al-Naziriyah. And the key task there was to secure the Al-Talil Air Base southwest of Naziriyah. That would later become an LSA and a command and control node for 5th Corps elements moving north. This took them through the first 24 hours, and on the 22nd of March, Charlie Troop Crazy Horse 3-7 Cav was tasked to move on this axis of advance to Al-Samala. The key task there was to secure another bridgehead crossing, the Euphrates River. And at 0745, Charlie Troop LD and moved up there, arrived on her about 10:45 hours. So they're about 3-5 clicks outside of Al-Samala looking at their objective, and 2 tech trucks started to rapidly approach. So the gunner PID the trucks and noticed there were 2 American flags flying in the back of the tech trucks. This was actually a special forces team that was embedded in Al-Samala. So they came forward to the Charlie Horse, Crazy Horse 3-7 Cav, provided them an intelligence reconnaissance handoff, and stated that the bridge within Al-Samala was not rigged to blow with explosives. However, there was a significant amount of paramilitary forces embedded in Al-Samala. So at this time, the paramilitary forces consisted mainly of your Ba'ath Party loyalists, Badr Brigade, Fedayeen, pro-Sunni, Saddam-loving freedom fighters. So Crazy Horse got that intel dump, went ahead and moved out to secure the objective, and immediately came in contact, and they were in contact for a total of 29 hours at Al-Samala. During this time, they killed over 550 paramilitary forces. They destroyed over 30 anti-aircraft artillery pieces that were used in a direct fire capacity at them. Destroyed over 35 tech trucks with discus mounted in the back, and destroyed 2 key command and control nodes in there. One was used by the paramilitary forces, and the second was used by the Iraqi Republican Guard advisors in Al-Samala. They were subsequently relieved by 1st Brigade of the 3rd ID, and then 3-7 Cav was then tasked to move along Route Appaloosa, which you'll get further in the brief, up to Objective Floyd, which is basically located in this area. And this brings us from the 23rd moving up into the fight on the 24th. I'll be followed by Chaplain Elliott for religious aspects.
Good morning. Good morning. I tell you, I'm excited. I've never had this many people show up to get baptized at one time before, so very cool. But I'm Chaplain Elliott, and I'm going to be briefing your religious area analysis this morning. So when 5th Corps Commander General Wallace made the decision to push north to Baghdad, he chose to bypass the cities of Samawa and Naziriyah. However, when he came to Najaf, he wanted to contain it. And that's very significant. When he was asked why that was the case, he said it was mainly due to the cultural, religious, and historical aspects of the city. So let's talk about Najaf. Next slide. So it was founded in 791 after they discovered Imam Ali's tomb in the area, and over the centuries since then, the city really built up around it. It is the fourth holiest city in Shia Islam, following only Mecca, Medina, and now Aqsa Mosque in Palestine, and is the spiritual capital of the Shiite world. Because of that, they see a lot of pilgrims. At any given time, there are more pilgrims in the city than there are actual people that live there, with approximately 8 million traveling through each and every year. It's also the starting point for the Hajj, for pilgrims traveling from Iran going to Mecca, and it is a Shia learning. It is a center of Shia learning and theology because of all the mosques, all of the libraries and schools and convents that are there. On the next slide, we see an aerial view of Najaf. So out here to the west, this yellow shaded area, that is not a chemical attack, that is actually a cemetery. At the bottom of that cemetery, you have the Imam Ali Mosque. Running north through south of the city is Highway 9. And you can see there are many mosques on either side of that highway, with approximately 24 in the city itself. And then on your eastern border there, you have the Euphrates River. So on our next slide, we're going to talk about the significant religious sites. So the first one is that mosque I talked about, the Imam Ali Mosque. It is one of the most holy sites in all of Shia Islam because it houses Ali ibn Abi Talib's tomb. So this gentleman was the fourth caliph to succeed the Prophet Muhammad for Sunni Islam. However, if you ask the Shias, they're going to say that he is the first true imam, the true successor to the Prophet Muhammad. And that is because they believe in the familial descent of the Prophet. Our second place is the Wadi Salam Cemetery, which in English translates to the Valley of Peace. However, we call it Ambush Valley. Good question. It sits at 1,485 acres, making it the largest cemetery in the entire world. For comparison, Arlington National Cemetery is 624 acres, so you can fit Arlington in this cemetery 2 times over. It contains tens of millions of bodies, with approximately 500,000 people buried there every year. And it contains the tombs of prophets, of course, Imam Ali, and they also believe that Adam and Noah have some remains buried there as well. So that makes this extremely holy ground. Devout Shias desire to be buried there because the belief is to do so is to guarantee entry into paradise. And one final point to note is it actually houses the largest Christian cemetery as well in all of Iraq. So this cemetery is not just important for the Shia, but the Sunni and the Christians in Iraq. This is what it looks like on ground. So as you can notice, not typically what we have back in the States. It's mostly tombs and mausoleums. However, there are grave sites and a series of catacombs underneath of it. These access roads run through all across the cemetery, but essentially it's a maze. It's very disorganized, very overcrowded. On our next slide, we're going to talk about the religious impact assessment. So going back to General Wallace's statement on why he contained Najaf, the religious, historical, and cultural considerations, he essentially wanted to minimize the collateral damage. You see, the U.S. is a signatory on the 1954 Hague Convention and Protocols, which essentially restricts the targeting of cultural sites such as cemeteries and mosques. Now, given that the enemy in Najaf was primarily composed of paramilitary forces who were going to leverage this fact and take that to their advantage, it really made sense to contain Najaf instead of just bypassing it. So by doing so, what he's doing is essentially protecting cultural sites. He's keeping the Shia populace happy. He's continuing to press north toward Baghdad. I would say he probably had a very good chaplain advising him to make this decision. I'll be followed by our S2, Lieutenant Batter.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is First Lieutenant Batter. I'll be briefing you the intelligence preparation of the battlefield for the Battle of Najaf. Next slide, please. Najaf became important due to intelligence estimates that Baghdad was reinforcing paramilitary and partisan forces and threatening friendly ground lines of communication and planned logistical support area ramps. Next slide, please. With the exception of temperature, weather factors severely degraded all warfighting functions capabilities, with emphasis on precipitation, as the winter of 2003 was one of the wettest recorded in Iraq, damaging bridges on secondary routes and restricting mobility in desert plains. Secondly, and most importantly, strong winds produced a monstrous sandstorm. And to orient you over here, this is Saudi Arabia. These are the borders of Iraq and Kuwait and Iran. These are the borders of the sandstorm. extending almost from the Red Sea all the way across Saudi Arabia and Iraq and encompassing all of Kuwait. This mother of sandstorms, combined with a previously failed deep strike, grounded all Army aviation for this mission. Next slide, please. The sandstorm combined with rain turned into a miserable mudstorm that reduced visibility to at times less than 25 feet. That effectively eliminated standoff weapon systems and optics advantage for friendly forces, and provided enemy forces the ability to sneak up close on friendly forces, with tank crews often having to use their handguns and hand-to-hand battle to fend off enemy attacking forces. Next slide, please. For maneuver units, the route to Objective Floyd was characterized by restricted to severely restricted terrain due to heavy vegetation along the riverbank and the densely populated urban terrain. Also, weather conditions limited mobility in the desert plains west of Route 28 or Route Appaloosa, which became the only avenue of approach for friendly forces. Next slide, please. For irregular threat forces, the freedom of movement was better for them, with the terrain providing them ingress and egress routes and favoring dismounted enemy forces, taking a mix of cover and concealment in natural and man-made terrain features, including mosques. And as you can see here, the sandstorm severely reduced visibility for friendly forces. Next slide, please. At Najaf, a mix of complex terrain presented friendly forces with multiple dilemmas, ranging from muddy vegetated terrain to the east and west of the rivers, densely populated urban areas with multi-story buildings, and as Chaplain Elliott mentioned, holy sites by which the enemy exploited rules of engagement, friendly use of rules of engagement, and restricted fire areas. Next slide, please. The main enemy the 3-7 CAV elements faced at Najaf was composed of 4 battalion-sized paramilitary and partisan forces, totaling about 14 to 2,100 committed fighters. The Director of General Security Emergency Battalion, at the time part of the Iraqi Ministry of Interior, was probably better trained than Fidayeen Saddam, the Ba'ath Militia Party, and the Quds Force. However, they all enjoyed very high morale, with the center of gravity focused on their loyalty to Saddam Hussein. The enemy used for weapons everything at their disposal, with the RPD machine gun, SPG-9, and RPG-7 making up the most lethal direct fire capability that they had. And they also used 60 and 80 millimeter mortars for indirect fire. One capability the enemy enjoyed the most was decentralized mission command, relying on cell phone communication to provide early warning from forward position spotters, and also use innovative techniques such as flashing entire city lights to indicate approaching coalition forces and give the signal to man fighting positions. Those tactics were at times vulnerable to friendly deception and SIGINT interception. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides depict 2 tactics the enemy used against 3-7 CAV, annihilation ambushes and assaults. Here we see an ambush where ambush elements, once alerted by a forward spotter, used machine gun and anti-tank weapon systems to engage friendly forces in kill zones in order to destroy approaching friendly forces on Route Appaloosa and disrupt the isolation of Najaf. Next slide, please. Here we see an assault where, again, enemy elements using similar weapon systems as discussed in the previous slide engage elements of Charlie Troop of 3-7 CAV in blocking positions at Objective Floyd, which is our decisive terrain, with the addition of the use of mortars to fix friendly forces. And as First Lieutenant Yost will discuss shortly, the friendly forces anticipated the enemy to use sea-burn capabilities, and the TTPs necessitated stopping movement anytime the enemy used indirect fires against friendly forces. Overall, the initial battles of the invasion of Iraq highlighted intelligence estimates failures and lack of imagination for how the enemy would utilize hybrid threat tactics and the will of the enemy to fight. Next, I'll be followed by First Lieutenant Yost, our protection officer.
Good morning. Next slide. In 2003, the main reasons the U.S. went to war was the are in threat. Saddam Hussein's continued use of CBRN weapons. But in the 1980 to 88 war with Iran, Saddam Hussein had used chemical weapons as an offensive means and had forced over 100,000 casualties upon the Iranians. He'd also used them on the Kurds and the Shiites, as we discussed. In 2003, Saddam had a very limited deep strike capability, and that was in regards to his surface-to-surface missiles. In total, they fired 17 of them from our invasion on the 21st to the 3rd of April, with 8 of those being intercepted by the United States and the Kuwaitis, 8 not being targeted due to them not being targeted at anything, and 1 blew up on the launcher. However, this is not the only CBRN delivery system that Saddam Hussein possessed. He also possessed artillery shells that were capable of delivering it. Thus, that prompted the SOP for the 3-7 Cav to be any time an artillery or missile strike occurred near their positions, they went to Mach 4, or until the all clear was given. And as the U.S. and coalition forces advanced into Iraq, extensive site exploitation became a big concern, as we can see here's one right there. Soldiers are looking at artillery shells. And once they seized the sensitive site, the big purpose became gather intelligence or collect CBRN weapon samples for analysis to determine, and possibly holding that site until they were able to dispose of whatever was there. And here's the CBRN weapons platform that the U.S. used during the invasion, which was the Fox. That'll be followed by the S4.
Good morning, I'm Lieutenant Hutchinson, and I'll be briefing the sustainment piece slide. So we all know soldiers have to have food and water, vehicles have to have fuel and maintenance, weapons have to have ammo and maintenance. It's our job as sustainers to make sure we supply the troops with what they need to succeed. But at this time, the weather made our jobs a lot harder. So all air assets were grounded, including sling mode operations and CASEVAC. Even during ground operations, visibility was still an obstacle, slowing down operation. Slide. Establishing the logistics foundation drove the operations to seize objective rams, roughly 2/3 of the way between the border at Kuwait and the Karbala Gap. After a 400-kilometer assault north, it would be necessary to refuel, rearm, and refit the 3rd ID before it continued north to Baghdad. During this time, the 3-7 would have consumed over 8,000 MREs, or 15 pallets, over 33,000 bottles of water, or 20 pallets. If we were to try to haul this today, it would take either 2 LHS or 2 PLS systems. Slide. Class 3. So for fuel's the largest supply burden that we face. If we want to look at how to calculate fuel, we're going to look at distance and time. In this case, objective Chatham, which is where they likely last topped off, to objective Floyd is 130 kilometers. Then I want to budget in 120 hours of idle time, meaning that they burned over 46,000 gallons of fuel. If I wanted to haul this, I could use 20 of the fuel tanks, or today I would use the tanks with the MFS. That would give me 10. Slide. Oh, class 9. So class 9 is essentially the same as it is today. We can get the parts even if it's slow, but we have a hard time getting the parts where they need to go. So they resorted to cannibalizing or controlled exchange and then towing damaged equipment. Slide. With the initial objective secure, shifting the combat power north was necessary to prepare for the attack on Baghdad. Not only moving the fighting forces north, but moving the logistics north to objective rams and securing the lines of communications there as well, making it not objective rams, but LSA rams. The constant attacks that the supply trains faced required us to contain and isolate Najaf. The largest strategic decision to fully secure LSA rams and the lines of communication resulted in the 82nd relieving the 3rd BCT at Samallah and the 101st relieving the 1st and 2nd BCTs on Najaf. Conducting a longer operational pause at LSA rams was the fundamental precondition for the Corps to launch its attack on Baghdad. I'll be followed by the S1, Lieutenant Wood.
All right, good morning, Old Hickory. Next slide, please. One of the primary concerns for the 3-7 CAV was personnel accountability. This is because on March 23rd, 2003, 2 days prior to the 3-7 seizure of Objective Floyd, the 507th Maintenance Company took a wrong turn and was ambushed by insurgents. Most of the convoy was killed, and Private First Class Jessica Lynch, pictured over there on the left, was captured. And then this brings it really close to home for West Virginia because 150 CAV is from there. On April 1st, 2003, the Joint Special Operations Task Force 121 conducted a night raid on Saddam Hospital in Nasiriyah. They were able to successfully rescue Jessica Lynch and recovered 8 bodies of other American soldiers. Now, Jessica Lynch is a 5th grade teacher in West Virginia, pictured on that 2019 on the right. When Jessica Lynch was describing her rescue, she said, "A soldier came into my hospital room and tore the American flag from his uniform and gave it to me. And he said, 'We are American soldiers and we are here to take you home.' She looked at him and said, 'Yes, I'm an American soldier too.'" Jessica Lynch was captured because of the lack of convoy escorts. The coalition forces severely underestimated the enemy and thought it was going to be a repeat of the Gulf War. This boosted the enemy's morale and confidence in being able to combat U.S. forces. This newfound confidence was primarily shown during 3-7 CAV seizure of Objective Floyd. They had a home field advantage, they knew the terrain, and they had the ability to operate in a sandstorm. While blocking Objective Floyd, Charlie Troop knew the risk of fratricide for when reinforcements were coming to arrive. They were in a sustained fight for over 24 hours, late at night and in a sandstorm, but were able to prevent any fratricide incidents due to personnel accountability and communication. I'll be followed by First Lieutenant Womack.
Good morning, my name is First Lieutenant Womack, and I'll be briefing the medical portion of the brief. Next slide. So the 3-7 had similar personnel and vehicles that we in the 150th have today, which will consist of 10 track vehicles, one physician assistant, and around 41 medics. So right here is pictured 113. They used it in 2003, as well as a deuce and a half with a medical refrigerator on top. Right here you'll see the IFAC. However, in 2003, IFACs were not issued out to soldiers. So now we know that IFACs have medical gauze, eye shields, MPAs, and chest seals, and 2 tourniquets. And at the time, in 2003, tourniquets also, it wasn't doctrine for the tourniquet to be placed on the soldier first. But now today we know that it saves lives to put that first. Next slide. Although the 3-7 had organic medical support with them, they were supposed to be able to rely on their Roll 2 and their air ambulance, which would have been the 498 air ambulance. At the time, they were actually stalled south-southwest of Najaf from about 26 March to the 3rd. So they were, at the time, only the Marines had thermal optical imaging, which assisted with night travel, and during the day it was almost impossible to see. Next slide. The 212 Mobile Army Surgical Hospital was also in support of the 3-7, and they were located 20 miles southwest of Najaf. They were a 37-bed intensive care unit and well positioned for the fight. To paint an overall picture, the MASH reported seeing 701 patients between the time of the 26th of March to the 14th of April. And out of that, the combat casualties were 74 Americans and 132 Iraqis. So to put it in perspective, that is like 37% to 64% casualties compared to the Iraqis. So if the 3-7 CAV had produced major casualties, the 112 would have been able to suffice, but the weather did not permit that. I'll be followed by the S6.
Good morning, sir. Command Sergeant Major, Old Hickory. I want to emphasize my portion of the brief, the importance of a robust PACE plan to support recon and movement operations, specifically beyond line of sight. We'll be emphasizing the movement to Objective Floyd and also the occupation of the areas of advance within Objective Floyd and the city of Najaf. Next slide, please. The 3-7 CAV's movement to Objective Floyd was replete with ambushes at numerous points of canalization, choke points along this route. It was incessant, irregulars, technicals attacked them consistently, spreading them out, as you can see, over a considerable amount of distance. The planning distance we use for FM transmissions is between 20 and 30 kilometers. And you can see here that their headquarters was approximately 50 kilometers separated from the Crazy Horse Troop down here, completely taking out FM communications. Next slide. Fortunately for the 37 Cav, they were the beneficiaries of initial fielding of BFT, otherwise known as Force 21 Battle Command Brigade and Below Blue Force Tracker. Next slide. This was an early fielding of this system. Obviously, it was slow, it was pixelated, and it was far from perfect. But what it did give the 37 Cav was critical situational awareness along their movement to Objective Floyd and the ability to communicate via text, even though they were way beyond line of sight. Next slide. This slide illustrates the city of Najaf down here. We have the Euphrates River going from north to south. We have Apache Troop to the north, Bone Troop, Crazy Horse, and then the headquarters. Those lines illustrate the transmission quality of their FM communications. Now this is under regular conditions, but keep in mind, while they were occupying these avenues of approach, it was a raging sandstorm. So I'm sure my fellow SIGOs would agree with me when I say there was probably several terrestrial orphans in their BFT systems. That's when you laugh. Fortunately for the 37 Cav, the JTAC had to cook with the Air Force, and they freed up their close air support net. And they used their organic HIS-5s to augment the different troops to be able to have beyond line of sight communications voice. So even though they were down their FMs, BFT was most likely very unreliable at this point. They had voice communications using the HIS-5 radios. Next slide. This slide should look familiar, the terrain to everyone here. This is the box, 2019. I wanted to emphasize 2 points with this. One, the distance that the 37 Cav occupied along the city of Najaf was very close to the AO we fought and trained in at NTC. And two, the nature of reconnaissance seems to always stretch FMs beyond its capabilities. Next slide. So my closing comments, just want to reemphasize, I hope I illustrated that a pace plan is very important to reconnaissance maneuver, especially beyond line of sight. You don't want to rely completely on FMs. And I'll close with, if comms fail, notes are always effective, as illustrated by the note to Major General Swannick from the 82nd Airborne Division from Lieutenant General Wallace, 5th Corps, telling him to get his ass up here. I'll be followed by S3, Major Hickory.
Good morning, Major Hickory, S3 150th Cav, Slide please. I'll be providing an operational overview of 37 Cav's seizure of Objective Floyd. First, I'd like to talk about 37 Cav's task organization, which is on the left of the slide. On the right, 150th Cav's current task org for comparison. So first thing I'd like to point out, 37 Cav was a Div Cav squadron. They answered directly to the division commander. It wasn't until later in 2003 that the Cav squadrons came to be resident of the BCTs. So the first thing you'll notice, each of the Cav squadrons have 3 ground troops, and then each have a Delta troop. Delta troop in 37 Cav was an aviation company, had a platoon of OH-58 Kiowa Warriors and A-64 Apaches, whereas our Delta troop is tanks, or our tank. Within the ground troops in 37 Cav, though, you did have armor. Each troop was task organized with 2 platoons of Bradleys and 2 platoons of tanks. So for total numbers here at the bottom, these are dismounts. That's what the Cav squadrons comparatively can put to the fight on ground. 37 Cav could do about 72 dismounts in a given operation, whereas 150th has about 108. And combat platforms, in this case tanks and Bradleys, 48 is what they had available, and 55 is what we bring to the fight now. Slide, please. So next we'll talk about the kind of operational framework that was facing 37 Cav's operation. And the problem facing 3rd Army at this point The tactical issue they had was one of the salient, which you see here illustrated by this rotated triangle. And what had happened is the diverging lines of operation between 1st MEF and 5th Corps had created a sliver of territory where there were no U.S. operations or coalition operations. So you'll see the 1st MEF was moving along Route 1, 5th Corps along routes 8 and 28 to the west. And what had happened, once again, there's no U.S. operations in that sliver of territory. So early on in planning, they had considered this. They knew it was going to be operational risk, but they were going to mitigate it by isolating or containing the enemy within the towns of Samala and Najaf. And they were going to use tempo and speed to pretty much make it unnecessary to get any more deeply involved in the cities. The whole plan was to bypass them if possible. But fiercer than anticipated resistance by the paramilitary forces in Nazarene and Samala was elevating the operational risk at this point in the fight. Samala and Najaf are both functioning as strong points from which the Iraqis could operate generally uncontested and project combat power out on the lines of communication to attack U.S. elements moving there without security. And once again, it also was threatening templated LSA and objective rams, which was required before pushing the Karbala Gap later in the operation. Slide, please. So the decision point. So the original plan, the focus had been the Republican Guard divisions to the south of Baghdad. It was going to rely on containment and once again tempo and bypassing the towns to mitigate the risk of the paramilitary forces. And it envisioned a short operational pause at LSA Rams. So in this plan, 3rd Infantry Division would leave 5th Corps and they would focus on the destruction of the Republican Guard Division south of Baghdad. The 1st Armored Division was going to secure the ground lines of communication along routes 8 and 28. 101st would isolate Baghdad, and if needed, 3rd Army would commit 82nd Airborne to jump and seize key terrain in Baghdad itself. But at this point in the fight, General Wallace, the 5th Corps commander, and General McKiernan, the 3rd Army commander, they're starting to be concerned about their overextended ground lines of communication. And the 507th's experience in Nazarene is briefed by the S1 earlier. So more 3rd Infantry Division combat power had been taken up with containing the enemy forces in Samala and further south in Nazarene than had been anticipated. In addition, 1st Armored Division and 2nd and 3rd ACR elements that had been planned to move forward on the tip fib hadn't arrived in time, so they weren't ready to assume total security. So General Wallace and General McKiernan wanted to consolidate prior to attacking through Karbala Gap and crossing the anticipated chemical weapons red line that they saw in the vicinity of Karbala Gap. So at this point, they were advocating for an adjustment. General Franks, you see in the top right there, he wanted to stick with the original plan, maintain tempo, get after the Republican Guard divisions, and continue movement. But once again, General McKiernan on the bottom there, the 3rd Army commander, finally won in the conversation, so they did reach a decision to adjust the plan. So with the new plan, the focus would be on securing the ground lines of communication and reconsolidation in LSA Rams, Objective Raiders, and Spartans prior to pushing forward. It would rely on isolation at this point of the bypass towns and the echeloning of forces to relieve 3rd ID elements and get them up to the reconsolidation points. And it would also have a longer operational pause in LSA Rams and the 2 objectives just to the north of them. So what happened, 3rd Army ends up releasing 82nd Airborne to 5th Corps for utilization on GLOC, and they would be moved up and they relieved the 3rd ID forces isolating Samala at that time, and they secured the southern part of the GLOC. 101st would relieve 3rd ID forces around the Najaf and secure the northern GLOC, and then 3rd ID would once again consolidate and objective Spartan and Raiders and prepare for the push through the Karbala Gap. Slide, please. All right, so this just real quick gives the tactical evolution of the operation. Initially, it was containment by 3rd Infantry Division forces, followed by isolation, which initially, once again, was 3rd ID, and then followed by commitment of the Army Reserve 82nd Airborne and the 101st to move up and do relief in place in the containments of Samala and Najaf, and eventually, beyond Objective Floyd, the decision was made that they'd have to clear those towns. So the progression finally got to the point where they had to clear them. But that is beyond where we will go today. Slide, please. All right, so at the point this decision is made, as the decision was being made, 2nd Brigade had moved up and was in the process of securing objective ramps just to the southwest of the job. And 1st and the 3rd was moving around to the west where they were going to seize objective raiders, one of the consolidation points prior to moving north. 3rd Brigade, 3rd ID was still south of Samala, isolating the town there. So at this point, once they decided to move from containment to isolation, 1st Brigade was tasked to seize and secure a bridge on objective Jenkins over the Euphrates. 2nd Brigade from objective Rams would contain enemy forces from Najaf to prevent them from coming out onto Route Dovers and LSA Ram. And then 3-7 would move up and go to the east, secure objective Floyd, and then move off to the east and ensure that Najaf was isolated from the east. So basically, 2nd Brigade prevents enemy forces from coming out of Najaf, and 1st Brigade prevents them from reinforcing Najaf from the north, and 3-7 prevents reinforcement of Najaf from the east. Slide, please. So at this point in receipt of mission, as been briefed by the XO, 3-7 Cav had been involved in the isolation fight at Samala. They've been in contact for 24 hours. 14 of that was heavy fighting. And they just had short of 24 hours of rest at the point they received the task to move forward. So they're relieved of Opcon to 3rd Brigade, and then they're immediately ordered to move just to the west and secure some crossing sites just beyond Samala. And then once that's complete, they're ordered to move north at 1800 on March. So they've just been released from the small fight, and they're told to move forward and seize objective Floyd. Slide, please. All right, some planning factors that were faced by 3-7 Cav. Their combat power wasn't at 100%, even though they've been in the fight for 24 hours, they hadn't lost any of their platforms. They are facing a single avenue approach to objective Floyd, and it was a section mobility quarter. So at any given point in the fight, they could only bring about a section to bear if the contact was made to the front. The route had been previously traveled by U.S. forces, and it was a 100K move. The enemy situation was poorly defined, as well as elements of the terrain, and it was basically going to be a frontal attack with prepared defense. Slide, please. So this was the plan. The route was going to be Route Appaloosa, which is Route 28. It's been demonstrated by the two. That's the Euphrates there, so it parallels Euphrates. And the order of march was going to be Alpha Troop, followed by HHT, Bravo, and Charlie. So basically moving in a squadron column up Appaloosa. Slide, please. So this is just a blow-up of Visalia, one of the towns along Route Appaloosa as they move north. And the inset here kind of shows you the terrain they faced. So this is a canal, and then just 500 meters on, they're crossing another canal. So multiple defile drills, multiple water crossings. There are 6 water crossings in this town alone, and 17 water crossings over the 100K they had to move from Samala. And later, or during this move north at Visalia, they'd have a heavy fight trying to force their way through the terrain. Slide, please. All right, so the plan for the seizure and consolidation. So Delta 3-7 aviation was grounded because of the weather. Bravo 3-7's task was to seize the bridge on objective Floyd and then pass Alpha 3-7 forward. And then once they did that, Bravo themselves would move up to the north, and they would block the enemy from reinforcing directly east of the job. Alpha would conduct an F-pole with Bravo, and then continue to move all the way to the north, up close to 1st Brigade, 3rd ID, and secure some of the crossings of the Euphrates there. And Charlie would remain on objective Floyd, blocking the bridge. Slide, please. So this just sort of illustrates the terrain. We've got objective Rams, Najaf. At this point, the Euphrates splits. You've got the western branch and the eastern branch. So Alpha Troop in the north would watch a series of bridges and dams that provided crossing points there. Bravo would watch the crossing points on the western branch of the Euphrates going directly into Najaf from the east. And then down here, Charlie Troop would be oriented along Route 71, which was a high-speed avenue of approach from Divania up to the northeast. There's a canalization point from a canal here, and then a double bridge down here on objective Floyd. Slide, please. All right, so the actual execution. During the approach, at 1800 on 24th, they're released from Opcon to 3rd Brigade. And then by 2000, they're SP. They're moving north on Appaloosa. 2100 is an hour after SP. They're engaging their first ambush. And this first fight takes 2 hours for Alpha Troop to fight through. So they fight over 9 hours to make the 100K move through continuous contact and arrive at the consolidation point, the attack position at 0550, just 10 minutes prior to launching the attack to seize the bridge on Objective Floyd. So this operation was started and conducted under severe handstorm. As had been mentioned before, fighting was in close quarters with enemy within 15 meters of the vehicles. There was no clearance, so at this point they made contact with the enemy. They didn't have the option to clear. The terrain was limiting, so they basically fought continuous contact drills all the way up Route Appaloosa to Objective Floyd. They were stretched out over 30 kilometers, which stretched their communications capabilities, which made it difficult to command and control the elements as they moved. But the bottom line, during this 9 hours of continuous fighting, they did suffer 8 vehicle losses. They were non-combat and they were temporary. 5 of those came from Alpha Troop. When they attempted to bypass with a 100-killer team, the bridge collapsed, so they effectively stranded a platoon on the far side of the canal, and they remained there until the next day when they could get them back. That was 2 tanks that took established. And then there were 3 other tanks that were mired when the Route 28 collapsed and dropped the tanks down into a ditch. So at this point, when 3-7 arrives in the attack position just 10 minutes prior to the attack, the squadron was 83% combat power, but Alpha Troop was at 69%, having lost those vehicles to the terrain. So at this point, Bravo Troop was tasked to lead the attack on the Floyd. So just food for thought, the planning factor, we consider 3 minutes per kilometer is a good kind of guesstimate as to how long it takes to traverse in terrain. This move was at 5.4 minutes per kilometer, so almost double. It is very complex terrain, and they were contacting the whole way. Slide, please. So the actual attack on Objective Floyd started at 06. Once again, just 10 minutes after arriving in attack position, Bravo Troop steps off. And by 10:43 on the morning of the 25th, they had arrived and seized the west bank and the bridge crossing. And by 1100, they'd seized the eastern bank. So at this point, the bridge on Objective Floyd has been seized. It's being secured. No contact at this point. 11:30, they pass Alpha Troop forward, and Alpha Troop starts their move up to the north to their objectives. And this is the point where Alpha Troop runs into heavy contact just east of the jaw as the enemy attacks out of it to try to impede their movement. Slide, please. So Alpha Troop continues to move north to their positions, and fighting picks up in the afternoon as the 3-7 CAF continues to push forces across the bridge and beyond Objective Floyd. Bravo Troop, once they pass Alpha, picks up their move and moves to their blocking positions just to the east where they stop. And that puts them in heavy contact throughout the afternoon with elements continuing to attack from Najaf to the east. They do lose two tanks in the fight here, but they continue to fight on, and A and B both end up making it to their objectives and securing their blocking positions. So fighting rages throughout the afternoon and into the evening, with Bravo Troop directly east of Najaf and Charlie on the bridge being the hardest pressed. And these were near suicidal attacks. The Iraqis at this point were driving onto the objective, basically in vans, trucks, jumping out and attempting to fight. So they were desperately attempting to regain that bridge and the eastern approaches into Najaf. Slide, please. So this carries us into the afternoon of the 25th, when fighting starts to drop off. Even to the north where 1st Brigade is, with 269 on Objective Jenkins, the fight starts to taper off. Alpha Troops generally not under pressure. Bravo's still seeing some, but not a great deal. But Charlie in the south is still getting smashed as they push forces down from D1E on 71's high-speed avenue approach to give them the best opportunity. So Charlie was under heavy pressure, and at 1824 on the 25th, 3-7 makes the decision. They call for reinforcement. That call goes back to 2nd Brigade at Objective Rams, and they task 164 Armor to move forward, first reinforce Charlie at the bridge, and then Bravo opposite of the job. And they do this, and they're successful, and they're able to continue fighting off the attacks, which eventually start to dwindle into the 26th. And finally, at the next day, elements of 2nd Brigade completely relieve 3-7 Cav in their blocking positions, isolating the job to the east. And then a day after that, on the 27th at 1200, 3-7 Cav is withdrawn. They move back to Objective Rams prior to being retasked shortly to move up and screen Objective Raiders and Spartan's just to the west. Slide, please. So the outcome of this battle for 37 Cav and 3rd ID as a whole, enemy was isolated. They couldn't move off to the west and attack objective Rams, and they weren't able to reinforce it from the east, north, or the south. Conditions were set for reconsolidation prior to forcing the Carbolic Gap. So this basically got them where they needed to be, and they were able to get 3rd ID consolidated and ready to move. And squadron combat power ends up being just 9%. So they come out of this fight basically 120 hours of continuous contact at 9%, which is not a bad track record. And for the entire division, the estimates are about 2,000 enemy killed in this fight, so pretty significant fight. But at this point, I'll be followed by Colonel Brackman with some lessons learned.
All right, we'll wrap this up with a quick discussion and draw out some points here. So the reconnaissance fundamentals that we put up at the beginning, how did the 37 Cav do? How did they do with ensuring their continuous reconnaissance? Well, I got a chocolate muffin here for an award for anybody's good answer. So it was a little bit rough for them, wasn't it? So in your reconnaissance element, and you get tactical tasks such as seize and block, it absorbs your manpower. So you can certainly do those tasks with 41 Bradleys and 14 tanks. You got the combat power, but it hurts the amount of eyes and elements that you have that can continue to perform reconnaissance. Now, other units can go do that for you, but that made it rough. They really got locked into Objective Floyd and Objective Jenkins, the bridges that they had to secure and block. So,
you think it should have been relieved earlier by like 164 to continue their reconnaissance mission?
yes, sir. They should have, to follow the fundamentals of reconnaissance, they should have arrived and they should have been a reconnaissance handoff pretty quickly and then let them jump forward so you have. So we're still forward doing reconnaissance and providing you early warning, sir, so you can it buys you time and space, so then you can decide when and where you want to attack the enemy. They lost some of that ability. What about retaining freedom of maneuver? Chocolate muffin. There's somebody missed breakfast. So if you become decisively engaged, you can give up your freedom of maneuver. And both the CAV elements on the bridges were decisively engaged. They gave up their freedom of maneuver. What about contact? Gaining and maintaining enemy contact. Now this one they did well. They fought for about 120 hours, almost 5 days continuously. Although they struggled to follow the first two fundamentals, they grabbed the tiger by the tail and they never let it go until they were properly relieved.
Hey, Bert, so you were talking about retaining the freedom of maneuver. You think if their aviation assets would have been in play, they would have been able to do some more of this. This weather really affected their ability to do some of the stuff they normally do.
Yes, sir, that's a great point in there. So the aviation element that wasn't able to get off the ground included a lot of firepower, included their Apaches. So relative to our combat power, it would be like the 150th not having their tanks available. And we use the tanks, that firepower. So if one of our units are decisively engaged, that's how we free them. We bring that combat power to bear, get them removed from their decisive engagement so they can then jump forward and continue reconnaissance. So yeah, that's not having the Apaches, not having the Kiowas certainly prevented them from removing themselves from decisive engagement. And then how did they do on reporting all their information rapidly and accurately? Yeah, the S2's they did terrible. It was, they faced the same problems we did. Like the S6 pointed out, they were trying to communicate over about the same distance that we were trying to communicate when we were in the central corridor at MTC. 35 kilometers in a sandstorm of a century, they simply couldn't do it. They were not able to do it. They did have BFT, but it was so newly fielded, information didn't really flow. But fortunately, they had followed a PACE plan. They had primary and backups, and what they really defaulted to was relying on their JTACs, who had SATCOM radios, and the JTACs, which each troop or company were able to relay information, and that's how the battle was coordinated.
How much was the weather as far as developing the situation, not being able to use the sensors of the platform? Because you was limited, not only aerial, but by every sensor that you had on the battlefield.
So it was a huge factor in the battle event in the JOF. You know, we planned to avoid a knife fight, but you have to be prepared just in case one breaks out, and it broke out in the JOF. Although we had superior numbers, superior equipment, superior capabilities and training, the weather reduced all of that, and we ended up in the 3-7 Cav ended up in hand-to-hand combat as a result of the weather. Next slide. All right, those are just drawing out the points we had. Any questions for us?
I think a lot of this had to do with risk. A lot of risk commanders were forced to take in not only in this battle, but the operation season. The name of the city
The JOF, Somalia.
the job and the overall operation to invade Iraq. Commanders were forced to do more with less, try out new concepts, and so they had to. I think troops and tasks were probably forced to commit their reconnaissance into a night fight to accomplish all the missions they were.
So as always, they adjusted this mission on the fly, even at the highest levels. And one of the big takeaways from the battle of on JOF is, the 5th Corps had to stop longer than they wanted to. They had to reconsolidate. And also, the decision had been made that the 3rd Brigade would move rapidly and forcefully, their reconnaissance. So they were bypassing towns with bad guys in them. And they ended up they had to back up and fix that, because their lines of communications were being attacked, successfully attacked, and that ended up in the 82nd getting remission. The 82nd started off with a really cool mission of jumping into Baghdad and securing key locations, using their airborne capabilities. But what happened is they ended up getting trucked into the fight. They got remissioned to guard the lines of communication, so they didn't jump anywhere. They got trucked into and the JOF and guarded those lines of communications while the 5th Corps built combat-powered objective rams, which eventually led to the assault into Baghdad and the Thunder Run.
And there were a lot of false assumptions made where we thought going into Iraq, the invasion of Iraq, false assumptions were made that the people of Iraq were going to agree us as concrete heroes. So we tried to do more with less, we accepted risk. So we thought that the people of Iraq were going to treat us as concrete heroes.
Yeah, we definitely underestimated the enemy, and we overestimated the amount of support that we get from the Iraqi population.
All right.
Sir, any of your questions?
Yeah, I got a couple questions to ask everybody. I get to do my part here. So, you heard all the briefs, especially their staff. Chaplain come out here, the 2 come out here, the 6 come out here. All 3 come out there, and the 6 just stand over like the lift ready or something, all right? So you think about what they told you up front had effects on everything that was going on. So to me it came back to this fight was really started out understanding the environment. Because the religious part did affect the environment. The weather and the terrain was major issues here, and then our communication was stuck. So what's this sound like to you guys, the environment we've been in recently? Somebody talk to me, because I'll call on you. Help me out here. Where have we been recently? NTC. So the same kind of stress. So I'll give you a little tip. Had Sergeant Major pull it up. 11th ACR commander, he was Charlie Troop Commander here. So the guy was the over 11th ACR at NTC. He was the company troop commander here. He fought this fall. 11th ACR guy out there was the Charlie Troop Commander here. Pretty crazy, huh? Small world. To bring stuff together. Maintenance, where's the 4 over there? I know she's in here somewhere hiding. So, you know, we fought this at NTC also, if you guys think about it. We got pushed forward and we had a lot of stuff going down. A lot of stuff. But we knew how to order the parts and get them on order, but what our problem was is getting them where? Get them to us and get them home. So you can see how this environment gets crazy, and that's what NTC did for us. That's what you go back and think through, is you sort of lived this long, but people weren't dying then. You know, when they needed to get somebody up, I pick on 252 because I was 252 commander years ago. When we were at the Wells Gap, I was yelling at the 252 commander on the radio every day, I need you to get up here, I need you to get up here. Well, they need somebody to get up there, right? So it's that environment you get put in. NPC is the closest you guys get to an environment like this unless it really happens. So pretty good example of an NPC as close as we get in the environment, the stuff that you face. So at the end, this is the last thing, and I always like ending up with this, and they brought it up. Where's your knife guy back there? Get your knife and bring it out here. Where's the knife, man?
You want the knife, sir?
No, I just want you to hang on to it because we don't leave back the point. The last couple times I wasn't able to be here, but the first time we talked about being in a knife fight, right? Setting those conditions, always win a knife fight. And just like the squadron commander said to all of you up front, you know, he doesn't see a squadron getting in a knife fight. You really see the cabs or whatever's getting into that because they're trying to see the vision out there in front. But you never know when you're going to be in that knife fight. So it goes back to training our soldiers to be prepared in that knife fight if they ever have to get into it. Because probably those squadron or those troops didn't see themselves getting that engaged. But they came extremely engaged. When you read a little more about it, they were dudes shooting out of the top of their dadgum Bradleys with their M4 and their 9mm killing dudes trying to get in their vehicles with them. That's how close their fight got. So I go back and I challenge you as leaders again, make sure you set the conditions, paint the good picture this staff's trying to paint that they struggle with. So now you understand why the weather, the conditions, the environment, the religious stuff that goes on in an area, your ability to create a pace plan, and most of all, how do you fix your shit when it's spread across 100 miles of stuff? And it's not easy. So as you guys know from NPC. But at the end of this, when you get to the knife fight, train your soldiers to win. You guys got me on that? Train our soldiers to win a knife fight. You never know when you're going to be that close to it. Because when you're in combat, nothing's fair, right? So be ready for the knife fight. Thanks. Good job, guys. Sergeant Major, you got anything real quick? All right. Let's get out of here. Good job. Thanks, guys.